because your time is valuable and we do have a lot of information to cover tonight, we're going to get started. Welcome again. I am Bill Brown, the Director of New Faith Expressions, and we are excited to be joined by all of the district administrators and some other helpful folks that will be with us tonight. And if you do have questions, please use the Q&A feature. We'll be monitoring that throughout the evening and we'll get to your questions. But to get us started, I'd like to welcome the Reverend John Wunderlich, the District Superintendent from the Cumberland-Hagerstown District, who is going to open us with a word of prayer. Good evening, John.
Good evening, Bill. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining the webinar tonight. We're excited that you're here. I'm going to open us with prayer, so would you please pray with me? Gracious God, thank you for the opportunity to gather this way tonight, separated by distance, but united together in purpose. United together in a desire to learn to do this ministry of statistical reporting in a more efficient way. We pray that you bless the technology, bless all of us as we seek to learn. We ask for wisdom and insight. We ask for patience as we ask questions. Above all, Lord, we hope that this would be a glorifying time for you as we focus on not just numbers, but on the people and the ministry and the blessing that is behind and through all these numbers. So bless those who are presenting tonight, bless those who are here to learn and listen, and may all be done to your glory. In the name of Christ we pray. Amen.
Thank you, John. Well, welcome everybody to our first ever Zoom Statistical Reports training. My name is Dave Scholler, and Tanya is going to pull up the PowerPoint for me so we can get going. All right, we're good. Okay, well, thank you again for joining us. Just wanted to give you a quick walkthrough for the evening. I will introduce everyone to you, and we will obviously dive into our topic of the night, which is statistical reports. We're going to talk about what we collect, how we collect it, and why we collect it. We will go over some of the timelines for the conference and the statistical report collection, chat about accuracy, and then we will break away from the PowerPoint presentation, and Crystal will give a walkthrough of setting up your account in Ezra, which is the stats reporting system, show you how to get going and give you a basic overview of the data entry involved and some of the things you'll need to know about responding to warnings and explanation requests and that sort of thing. And after that, we will jump back into the PowerPoint, and I will highlight some of the areas of the three tables that are needed in statistical reports and just hit some of the areas where we see the most questions and where we see the most issues when it comes to over-reporting or misreporting data, because they're a little bit more complex than others. And finally, we'll wrap up just kind of pointing you to some of the tools and resources that we have available on our website. So introductions. My name is Dave Scholler. I'm a business data analyst, and I work in the finance and administration department of the conference. I think I just passed my 10-year point. And my co-presenter this evening, as I mentioned, is Crystal Medley. Crystal is the district administrator for the Washington East District. And joining Crystal are the other district administrators. Baltimore region, we have John Gutier, Baltimore Suburban. Christine Taylor is with the Baltimore Metropolitan District. Willing Kamara is with the Annapolis District. Crystal Medley, as I mentioned, is Washington East. Olivia is Greater Washington. Sophie Amir is the Central Maryland District. Tanya Bennett is our PowerPoint operator tonight, and she's in the Frederick District. And Penny Gaver, last but not least, is the Cumberland-Hagerstown District Administrator. So we welcome them all here. I'm sure many of you have spoken with them on numerous occasions, and if you haven't met them before, you can at least see their face for the first time. So welcome, everybody. So statistical reports, they are broken down into three main areas. Table 1 is all about the membership and participation areas of the church, from small groups to professions of faith, Sunday school, missions and outreach is all captured on Table 1. Table 2 is used for recording all of the expenses associated with the church, and including any sort of assets that they might have. Table 2 is definitely the most important when it comes to statistical reporting and also our training tonight, because the information provided on Table 2 is going to be used to calculate your mission share. And so it's very important that you have a thorough understanding of that table. And that is why we'll spend some extra time there to walk you through some of the areas of that table that sometimes trip folks up. Table 3 is all about the income side of the church life, from offering plate money to anything from rental income to investment income. If it is a cash inflow, it is going to be recorded on Table 3. So we'll hit that as well. There is one additional worksheet that we have. It is used to help you take advantage of the utility expenses that the church has that might be associated with mission and outreach activities. So we added that a few years ago to help sort that out. In general, the denomination has a core set of questions that they update every 4 years. This is the last year of the quadrennium that we'll be using this set of questions. And annual conferences have to use the core set of questions, but they can add questions if they want, or if they want to get clarification regarding some programs or statistics that might be pertinent to their conference. We are gracious, and we, I think, only add about 2 or 3 extra questions, so we don't hit you too hard on the extra questions. So we try to keep things to the bare minimum. And statistical information is collected on the GCFA website called Ezra. We'll be mentioning that as well. So statistical information, why is it important? We get asked that. Anyone, especially a new Methodist, sometimes is overwhelmed by the amount of data that Methodists collect on everything. And statistical information is one of the areas of information collection that closely follows the church conference season. And it's an annual report of everything that is important to the life of a church and the vitality of a church. Like anything that we do, it is covered in the Book of Discipline, and the 2016 Book of Discipline citation is up there at the top. Just letting you know that, yes, this is a part of the life of the church and is required to certify everything involving the life of the church. So why it's collected and how it's used, it is used to evaluate, first and foremost, the vitality of the church. Some churches input statistics as the year goes on using a system called vital congregations. Overall, it also helps us evaluate any needs that the conference or that the church may have, so that the annual conference can reach out to the church and provide aid or resources or steer churches or clergy to programs that we have. As the information flows up from the local church into the annual conference, the denomination can look at and draw comparisons between annual conferences as well, so they can see what is working and what might not be working. For us as well, as I mentioned, statistics are used to compute the mission share for the church that is due. And then as we are coming into this time of year, the statistical information is also vital for the cabinet as we're entering into the time of year where the cabinet is making decisions on appointments. And it allows them a look into all the vitality measures of both the church and the pastor. So a quick overview of what is a typical year in the statistical report season. This is all part of our budget process, which starts on a normal year in September. We will send out surveys to church pastors and leaders. And for those of you that may not have received those yet, I'll touch on that in a minute. As I said, in a typical year, this is not a typical year for many reasons. We will survey our church pastors and leaders and ask for, it's a very short survey, just asking what you would like to see in the upcoming budget, so that we can bring all that information back to our Council on Finance and Administration and help to guide the decisions that are made about the budget. Beyond the church information collection, this is the time of year when my department sends out the requests to all of our departments for the programs and expenses that they will need in order to have budgeted. And in December, this is where we kick off our statistical report training. And typically we have the training, and then the week after, the 16th, we will have the Ezra system, or the statistical report collection system, open up for review and preparation. Because all the statistics are year end, there's not a whole lot of actual data entry that you can do at this point, but we do recommend that you at least get in there, kick the tires, make sure you're able to log in, especially if you have new people, just to get them comfortable with the system. You can print your statistics from the prior year and get settled in and distribute things to people that are going to be supplying some of that information to you. So then January 1st is when the kickoff begins with the data that you can collect at year end. And the actual season of getting all the information in runs from January 1st through Tuesday, January 26th this year at noon. And that's our deadline for getting everything in. After that, about a week later, very important letter will hit your inbox, and that is a verification of the statistics that you just put in, and it will translate those into what your estimated mission share is. This year, we're going to be reporting 2020 statistics, so that will be impacting our budget and your mission share for 2022. The reason we do it so far out is that all of these budget pieces have to come into place and be solidified before annual conference, where it is all voted on and approved for the coming year. As I mentioned before, this is a typical year. We are pushing things farther along, as our annual conference this coming year is going to be later. So some of these timelines are going to get shifted a few weeks, so you will probably see some of the surveys coming out after statistical collection ends. So I just wanted to give you a heads up that we're kind of shifting some of these components for this season. So statistical reports accuracy, for some of the reasons I just hit on, it is very important. We are using all this data to set budgets for the conference. And so it is really important that all the information that flows in from the local church level is accurate. And obviously, like anything else, it just boils down to good planning and record keeping, care and concern about the information that you're putting in. Some of the common sense things to keep in mind is just double checking your work and having someone else look at your work. Typically, we find that the churches that have the largest, most glaring errors that are not picked up until late in the process are because that one person was assigned for the statistics and no one else looked at their work, and they are sure that everything was accurate, and it turned out it was not. So please, even if you think it's perfect, please have somebody else at least look over your work to see if you missed something, and it will really help you out. Definitely not recommended is fudging and wild guesses. The story that we had is 1 year our statistics for our expenses were wildly off, and we realized that somebody was having a bad day and hit the 9 key a bunch of times, one of their data entry areas, and inflated all of our figures by a couple $1 million. So that had us scrambling around for a while. So please don't do that. Backing up your answers, that means that when the system flags things that may be off, generally because they are swinging quite a bit from year to year, or maybe something is missing, the system will flag it and ask you for an explanation. That really helps us and helps you catch things as you go along. So those explanations are required so that we can get an idea of why things may have changed and just that you're aware of it. If things are explained. Sometimes we will have folks that say it's accurate, even though it has maybe swung 30 or 40%. We may come back to you and say, hey, this doesn't make sense. Let's sit down with you and get some more information and maybe figure out where this piece of data is so off. So just keep that in mind. So as I mentioned in the timeline in February, which is about a week after the deadline, you will receive an email with an attachment. And on the second page of that attachment, you'll see something that looks like this table here. I know it's a lot of information, but the reason we supply this is the column to the far right is your most recent statistic reporting year. And that will show you everything that you put in that was used to compute your mission share. And as you go down, you will see the mission share estimate and how much that mission share has gone up or down, both dollar-wise and percentage-wise from the prior year. The information on the other columns is used to help you spot why something might have changed. 9 times out of 10, if you see, in this example here, it might be a little bit tough to see unless you have a big screen. But in this case, in this example, this church's mission share went up by 8.3% over a year, which is a lot. And you can see the little arrows are pointing there to the line 61, and it shows that it just about doubled year over year, which is most likely an error. So this allows the churches to kind of double check and spot things and get back to us with corrections long before any of this impacts their mission shares, so that it can be corrected. So we definitely want to make sure that you pay attention when that comes. We send it to the church office, pastors, leaders, send it to about 3 different people in the leadership of the church. So make sure to keep an eye out for that when it comes in. It's very important. So statistics, as far as where you report everything, it's, although we do a lot of activities in the ARENA system, it is not where you enter your statistics. It is in a website called Ezra, and it's maintained by GCFA, which is the General Council on Finance and Administration. And that is where all of your statistics are inputted and where it is all stored year over year, and you can access it. So make sure you don't go into ARENA looking to start your stats entry process. So with that, that is the lead into breaking away from the PowerPoint, and we're gonna let it cut over to Crystal, and she's gonna give you a walkthrough of getting your account set up for the year and walking you through some of the key points when it comes to data entry. So Crystal, I'll let you take it away.
Thanks, Dave.
Sure.
Good evening, everyone. We will be logging into the GCF Ezra system, and that is currently visible on your screen. It is Ezra, ezra.gcfa.org. And once you log into the system, you will come to the home page that has your username. Your username is 3810, your 4-digit church ID, followed by a P, which is for primary, or a O, which is for other. The password is stats 2020. So initially when you log in, the first thing it's going to ask you to do is to set up your user account. You'll see the church name and your GCFA number. Hit the button that says next. And it wants the contact information for the person who will be inputting this information. It is very important that you give us your email address and a telephone number. That way, if we have any questions about what's on the report, we know who we can contact. Next is your password. We do not recommend changing your password because multiple people will be inputting information. We want the password to be consistent so that everyone has access to the system. So when you enter the information, you're just going to put stats 2020, and then you'll just repeat that twice. Then once you're done, hit the finish button, and it will take you to the home page for submitting your information. On January 1st, when the system is available, you should go in and you should print blank copies of each form so that that information can be distributed to the people who are responsible for helping you gather this information. So on the screen, you'll see Test UMC. We're going to select Test UMC, and we're going to hit Run Report. The report will run, and you will get a link to download the PDF versions of the reports. And the system will generate your reports for you. You will notice that the system has automatically populated your final report from 2019 as to help you as you're completing the 2020 report. You should print this report out and distribute it to everyone who will be helping you gather that information. Now we will move on to actually beginning entering your stats. We will start by entering your membership information. The deadline to have all of this information in the system is Tuesday, January the 26th at noon. So let's click on membership. And it is going to bring up table number 1, which is membership and participation. To ensure that you are completing the right year, we want to look at the left-hand corner to make sure it says the year is 2020. And if it pops up and it's 2019, you just hit the caret and you can select 2020, and it will bring that report up for you. Once you've reviewed your church information and that information is correct, we want to go down to actually looking at the questions. So in field number 1, that information is automatically populated based upon the information from the previous year final total. So then basically what we do is we go through and we answer those questions, entering all of the information in each question. Once you have populated all of your answers, we will go to the bottom of the screen. And we will hit the save button. Once you save your information, you will get a message that tells you if everything is correct and ready to be submitted or if there are errors. So once you get the notification that there are errors, if you go to the top of the page, it will identify where your errors are. In this particular case, line 9 has an error. So we want to go to line 9. and you will see the information is in red. And we want to correct the number of professing members. And then we go down to the second red arrow, and we want to correct our membership based on gender. And once you've made those changes, you can hit save. And it tells you that your report is acceptable, except you have a warning. And that warning tells you that you are reporting a nothing in a line that was previously reported. So in order for it to be complete, you must enter an explanation. So you hit the enter button, type in your explanation. Hit update, save, and you will get a message that your table is complete and it is okay to proceed to the next table. So you go to the top of the screen, and we want to work on the table 2 worksheet, which is the expense calculations, question 48B on table 2. So based upon your direct expenses that you'll be using the utility calculator for, you will input this information. Once all of the fields have been entered, we will hit save. It tells you your report is good. Print a copy for your records. Now we're going to switch over to table number 2, church assets and expenses. And if you scroll down, you will see that your ministry costs have been automatically populated based upon the information you entered on worksheet B. We are going to pause, and I believe Bill is going to open us up.
We do have a few questions, and I first want to say God bless you, Crystal, and to all of our DAs who know this so well, and to Dave. I've been doing this for a number of years, and I still don't always catch all of the different pieces to the statistical reports. So a couple of questions that are coming up. Has the report for 2020 changed at all from the 2019 report, or will people say that it looks very similar?
The report does look very similar. There are a few questions that have been modified or we've added additional clarification to. For example, if you go back to the membership report on question number 10, where we talk about the number of people participating in worship service, there is a question that says the number of people participating in full in-person worship. Thanks, Tanya. That the question is currently highlighted. It's in green. When you are answering this question, we want you to think about the time period for where you were having full service worship. Pre-COVID, that would be from January till about March, the end of March. Those are the numbers that we're looking for in question number 10. And then in question number 10A, that's where you're going to be entering your your membership based upon the people who are watching your online service via Zoom, YouTube, Facebook, however many platforms you were using. This is where you want to enter your viewership.
So just because I know I've gotten this question a lot, just so we get it very clear, question 10 is in-person worship prior to March 14th, I think, or March 15th was the first Sunday we really had our pandemic shutdown. So prior to March 15th. And then 10.A would be post March 15th, or once we shifted to online, Zoom, conference call, worship. So the follow-up question to that would be, do we include any of our in-person worship we may have done, like drive-in worship, or I know some churches returned to in-person worship before this most recent surge. Would we include that anywhere, or just maintain our online worship?
Dave, can you provide the
Sure.
definition for full in-person worship?
Correct. So because there was such a shift in how we worship this year, GCFA modified that question so that really it's only the full in-person worship, although we were glad that some churches were able to worship with some drive-in, walk-in, outdoor services. In general, if that information was included, it would usually depress the overall average for the church year. So in order that there's not a large blip in the statistics for 2020, that is why they would like to only include those weeks when you were full in-person worship, just like any other year, so that they can get the best data possible.
So in my understanding also, some people were doing outdoor worship while also doing virtual worship. So in that instance, you would not count the outdoor worship. You would just count the virtual worship in 10A.
Correct.
Thank you. Couple other questions. Best practice. Should one person enter the data after collecting it from everybody, or should multiple people enter the data? What's the best practice for that, in your opinion?
So the system, like most web-based systems, if two people happen to be putting in data at the same time, the first person to click save wins. So we definitely discourage having multiple people put the information in. You should try to appoint one person that is your data entry person. That doesn't have to be the person doing the research, but try to make it one central person so that you don't have what we call versioning problems, where one person might be entering in one thing in one place and another person entering another thing in another place. So if at all possible, keep it to one person.
Okay, couple other questions. With the password, is it case sensitive? The stat?
As far as I know, it's not, but it should be entered in as all lowercase with no spaces.
Okay, and someone would like, just if you could briefly explain that login process again, because a couple of people have asked, what's the username?
So
Okay.
Yep, go ahead, Crystal.
So Tanya, can we go back to the login for Israel? So when you are logging in, your username is generally a code. Everyone starts with 3810. And then it's your church's 4-digit ID number. In this case, we're using 9991. And then your account has a primary account and it has an other account. So if you put a P at the end, that stands for primary, which is the main account. And then your password is stats, all lowercase letters, STATS 2020. And we will be providing you with the guide for entering this information, and it will have all of that information in there for you. What's critical is you need to know your church's 4-digit ID.
Question, and I knew we're getting a lot of questions on worship. Some of them I will be able to answer privately, but with the worship, I know several churches and several charges are doing worship together online. How would they share that data if they don't know, if they have 100 people viewing, but they don't know which church?
Yeah, so
Which?
in the statistical reports guides that are on our website, there's a section called Tips for Recording Online Worship, and it walks through some of the basics, but the bottom line is with online statistics and analytics, there is no perfect system, and that's when there's only a single church involved. Because there's various lengths of time that people are viewing the service. People are sometimes logged in with multiple devices. So the tips will help get you closer to the true number, but there's definitely going to be a point where it's going to be your best educated guess using the information that you have available.
Right.
It might be where if you can see a sample Sunday, what the split might be, take that ratio and just use that for the remaining Sundays. This is definitely not something where we're gonna put you under a hot lamp and have you recreate all of your calculations. So do the best that you can with the information that you have available. You will see in the tips that there are some guidelines for looking at visitors that have some of the platforms like YouTube will allow you to look at people that have watched the majority of the service as opposed to just kind of a raw hit count. So there's some information in that, and that is in one of the online resources that we have available.
Excellent. And I know, as in years past, you provide some very detailed guides. And I know that once we shift into full-on stats preparation, our DAs are on call and are able to answer some of these questions. So I'm going to let you continue, and I will pick up some of these questions as they come in.
Crystal, are you all wrapped up? Should we head back to PowerPoint?
All wrapped up, Dave, and I'm going to pass it back to you.
Okay, great. Thanks. Tanya, we're seeing the presenter view that's doesn't have the full screen. There we go. So jumping back into the presentation, the couple of things we want to highlight, local church membership. Again, the biggest thing to keep in mind there is the carry forward from the previous year is going to be at the top of the table, and that is one of the, I think it is the only field or box that you cannot modify. Sometimes we will get people that are confused that they can't change that number, and the reason is that it is a carry forward from the end of the last year. It's other than that, it is a year to year going horizontally across the statistical reports as you go. Some quick comments on the participation for activities and attendance. Keep in mind that some of the questions are asking for the number of groups, whereas some of the other questions might be asking for the number of people. So keep that in mind when you're answering those questions. It will help you give the accurate information. Sometimes they're right after one another, and you just need to read them a little bit more carefully. So you can flip to the next slide. So the table, the worksheet table that Crystal covered is used to record utility expenses that are associated with mission and outreach activities that the church may have. That table, we recommend that the information that you're putting in that table is arrived at after using our utility expense calculator. What that is, it is available online. There's a screenshot of it here from last year's, and it is an Excel sheet that allows you to calculate the deductions that you'll be able to take. And I'll give you a quick walkthrough of it. On the left-hand side at the top will be where you enter in the church's annual expenses for electric, oil and gas, water, and phone and internet. And that will give you a total of the expenses that can be deducted against. You will put in the total square footage of the building. And then from that point, you will go through in the area down below where you see the detail rows, the numbered rows. And for example, we would start on the first row and we would say organization might be Boy Scout troop, whatever. Room name might be Fellowship Hall. You put in the square footage, the number of hours per week that group meets there, the number of weeks per year that the group meets there. And as soon as you have completed entering the number of weeks and you hit the tab button, you will see for that group the amount of utility expense that can be attributed to that activity. So that will be your per activity breakdown at the bottom, but then you will see at the top on the right, you will see the total being rolled up as you enter the detail. Once you have entered in all the groups that may use your church over the course of a year, you will see all of the boxes at the top completed, and that's when you can then go over to the worksheet in the online stats area and enter those numbers verbatim onto the worksheet, and you have the box numbers there to the left of all the Excel cells. And that is where you would enter, and the worksheet would then feed into table 2, which is the missional expense for the church. So keep that in mind. If you do plan on taking that deduction, make sure your first step is to download and fill out the utility expense calculator before you go into the online worksheet. Then you will have all the work done for you. So getting into table 2, again, as I mentioned, that is about assets, debt, and expenses. Some of these lines are used in the mission share based calculations. One overarching ideal with our mission share calculation is that we do not want to apportion any expenses that are associated with mission programs, and that includes community outreach. It might include a nursery school or a preschool, any sort of activity for soup kitchens, anything that you may have to service your community and assist those that are in need. And that extends beyond Methodist needs to community focused groups, AA, Girl and Boy Scouts, any other groups that have a community outreach and service component to them. Those expenses we do not want to apportion against. So when all else fails, if you're wondering where to report something, if it's a missional expense, it should be reported on a missional line on table 2 and not wrapped into general operating or general program expenses of the church. There is another area where we see errors made, and these tend to be costly. because they are associated with large capital expenditures where you have, say, a roof that leaks and you have to replace a large roof. Your boiler might go up, something that's a very infrequent but unfortunately expensive cost associated with operating your church. So make sure that those expenses are backed out of your operating expenses that you report and put on the line for capital expenditures, which you will see on table 2. Anything that is, these are not day in, day out expenses like, say, a maintenance contract, but again, these are infrequent and expensive repairs to the church or things that the church might need. And I do give a caveat, even if the incremental expenses of that are low. I use the example of if the church says they have to repaint the whole interior of the church, it might be a $500 or $1,000 a month expense over the course of the year, but it's going to add up to $12,000, $15,000. So make sure that you're recording all of those expenses rolled up and tallying it in a capital expenditure line so that you're not apportioned on that cost. And again, because those costs are high, if a mistake is made and it's put into an operating expense bucket, it can make a big swing in your mission share allotment. So keep that in mind. So at the top of table 2, there are questions regarding the compensation for the pastor. Some caveats with that is make sure you're including the base salary of the pastor and other areas of compensation. That information should be fresh in your mind because that was tallied up on the clergy compensation form that was recently submitted at church conference time. Actually, at the bottom of that form on page 3, there's a summary roll-up, and some of those lines actually verbatim can be moved over into the statistical reports for the same amount. So if you break that out, make sure you have that to reference, and that will give you much of the information that you need to record your statistics. One thing to keep in mind, if your church does receive grants from the conference for equitable compensation or other grants to support the compensation package of the clergy member, please make sure to back that amount out of the pastor's compensation. So for example, if the pastor is making $50,000 a year, but the conference is paying $10,000 towards equitable compensation, you would record $40,000 for base salary, and you would include the equitable compensation as an income to the church on table 3. Because we don't apportion or compute mission shares on income related things, that's why we want to make sure that you report that as income and not include it in expenses that the church is paying out of their own pocket. So keep that in mind. Also, make sure that you're not wrapping any benefits related expenses for the clergy into the compensation that you report on table 2. That's including health, pension, medical, vision, dental, all those items should not be included in the compensation package that you're reporting on table 2. Another area that we see quite frequently, and this actually is increased as the years have gone on because we have more and more multi-point charges and cooperative parishes. Make sure that you are reporting, if you're in a multi-point charge, that you are reporting only the compensation for the part of the compensation that you are paying from your church. Even if you know the pastor is making $50,000 a year, if you're splitting that between you and the other church in the charge, you should be reporting $25,000 and the other church should be reporting $25,000. So keep that in mind so that you don't over-report that expense and then overpay on your mission share. There's also a clergy compensation worksheet that we have online that breaks out some of these categories and helps you differentiate the different categories of compensation reporting, and that's going to be on our website as well, so keep an eye out for that. So housing calculation, I bring this up because we always get questions about how we compute mission share when we have two very different scenarios when it comes to the expenses of a church. Some churches have a parsonage, they own the parsonage, the expenses of running that parsonage may be $5,000 or $10,000 a year, whereas another church may be giving their clergy member a housing allowance that might be in the $20,000 range. So in order to bring parity between those two types of scenarios, we came up with a calculation years ago that we call a donut calculation. It's similar to some of you that use Medicare. And I bring this up and let you know about it just so that you know it's there. If you ever wonder about the calculation, it is going to be shown to you on your statistics and mission share verification notice. But just want to let you know that that is in place, and we have information about it various places. But the good news is you don't have to compute it, know anything about it other than it exists to bring parity. And I wanted to let you know that it's there. The top and bottom of the calculation tends to shift as the housing recommendations are updated as the years go by. So right now, the donut hole calculation is based on the $20,263 minimum recommended housing allowance, and that will sometimes change as things change in that regard. But I just wanted to mention that to you. So on the table 2, another area of misreporting is the inclusion of expenses that are associated with raising funds or having a capital campaign or a fundraising campaign. There is a specific line that is available on table 2, 63A, and that is outside of the lines that are used for the calculation of your mission share. We do not want to apportion you on money that you're using to make money. So make sure if you have spent money on a capital campaign, that could be renting a tent or a caterer for a kickoff event, for maybe expanding the church, some additional expenses for utilities, anything that's associated with a capital campaign, make sure you're breaking that out of your program or operating expenses and putting that on line 63A. However, day in, day out, stewardship campaign expenses should still be recorded on program expense lines. We just wanted to show you that differentiation. We're talking about a large capital campaign or something that's outside of your general stewardship expenses, like mailing offertory envelopes, or maybe if you have a consultant or someone working with you on a stewardship campaign, that would still be included in program expenses, but capital campaigns, you can break that out. In and out costs are another area where churches can end up over-reporting some of their expenses. Typical accounting practices would state that an expense and the income generally go into the same bucket, but sometimes people have different bookkeeping practices, and that can trip them up. An example that I like to use is, say your church comes out of pocket and buys 10 tickets to rock. And the intention is that you are going to then advertise to your congregants that you have 10 tickets available to rock. And if you're interested, all you need to do is send in a check and your youth can go on that trip. So the expense is made for the purchase of the tickets, and then the income is brought in to reimburse you for the expense of those tickets. If you are charging the parents 100% of what your ticket costs are, all of that should net out to zero. So if you are booking the expense and the income in two different areas, or you want to make sure that you're not over-reporting the expense. If you have the expense of that mission trip in your program expense, but then the reimbursement is in some other area, you would end up over-reporting the cost of that program, when it should be netting out to zero or less than you actually outlaid for that expense. So that tends to happen with trips, sometimes big meals up front where you might charge then a ticket price. Just make sure that you're following some generally accepted bookkeeping practices, which is the in and out, the expense and the income are generally booked to the same accounting code or bucket or whatever you want, however you want to refer to it, so that you don't end up overstating your expense. Preschool and childcare activities are another large area of expense, and these are associated with missional programs. So make sure if you have a preschool or childcare program that you are not wrapping those expenses into your church operating and program expenses, because that could dramatically inflate the expenses that are recorded for the church, and that could then in turn dramatically inflate your mission share calculation. So keep that in mind, make sure that it's broken out. Many churches have those as a separate company anyway, but make sure that you're not intermingling those expenses and keeping that clean differentiation. Line 62, operating expenses. Again, we touched on the deduction that you can take for mission and ministry costs. I'm bringing that up again with line 62 because utility expenses are generally recorded on line 62 as an operating expense. So if your utility expense calculator tells you that you can deduct $5,000 out of your total utility expenses, make sure you're backing that $5,000 out of line 62 and placing it on line 48B using the calculator and the information that you entered on the worksheet. So sometimes we run into issues where people will record that mission share amount, but they still keep it in their operating expenses. So they're not taking advantage of the deduction after it's all said and done. So make sure you're keeping those separate. Make sure you back out the amount of deduction that you're entitled to based on the calculator. Don't double record compensation and benefits for the clergy. We will see some churches double count that. We'll see it up in the compensation area, and then again, it gets put in down below, maybe in program or other salaries. So make sure that you're keeping those clean and split out into the correct lines. So our mission share base, again, it's all calculated on table 2, and it's based on lines 53 through 62. Touched on already that 53 and 50 through 56 is related to the clergy compensation, both their salary and any sort of reimbursables that they may have for the lead pastor, associate pastor, or deacon if you have them. Line 60 is salary and benefits for all other church staff or diaconal ministers. And then line 61 is costs associated with program expenses like Sunday school or other programs that the church has. And then line 62 is usually the largest line because that is the catch-all for all other operating expenses associated with the church that are non-missional in nature. So that's the detail of what goes into the calculation on table 2. All of that information is recorded and reported by all of our churches. And at the conference level, all of those figures are added up and included in what the conference refers to as the mission share base. That is the figure that the mission share is based on. That is then multiplied by the benevolence factor. And the benevolence factor is voted on every year, and it is evaluated every year by the Council on Finance and Administration. For 2020, the benevolence factor was 17.55, which was a slight reduction from the previous year. And the mission share base and the benevolence factor are multiplied together to get the total amount of possible mission share income that we could receive at the local church level. Beyond that, the actual receipt of the monies is based on the collection rate. We were very fortunate and blessed at the conference that we have a very high collection rate. That really does help maintain the fairness and the connectional system that we have, that all churches are contributing. We are blessed that we have a collection rate that's up into the around 90%. Some conferences are down into the 60s. And it makes it very difficult to administer their mission share system. So those three factors combined, the mission share base, the benevolence factor, and then the collection rate, is what are multiplied together that give us the total mission share income for the annual conference budget. So that is all the pieces of the puzzle that go together, and that is what we base our budget on and what we recommend for a vote at the coming year's annual conference. So table 3 is definitely the easiest to fill out. It's definitely more cut and dry than the other tables. It is all about income to the local church. It is information about the number of people pledging, where the pledges and the income and the offering comes in, whether it's a pledging giver, non-pledging giver. There's also areas where you can record income from other areas outside of the offering plate. So it might be interest and dividends on an investment. If the church rents out space to outside groups, that is where you would record that income. If you are getting in the income from the capital campaigns, we already talked about the expenses associated with it, but the actual revenue coming in from a capital campaign, that is where you would record that as well. This year, there's definitely a key area on table 3, because on table 3, that is where you're going to be recording your PPP loan amounts. Whether or not the loan was forgiven, the total amount of PPP funds that come in are going to be reported at the bottom of table 3. There is some information about that in our line instructions. We have it highlighted in yellow, and it's also online. If the PPP loan was not forgiven, that amount would then be included on other debt areas on table 2. But the total amount of the PPP loan, and some of the district administrators let me know that there are also local governments that are giving grant programs to churches, specifically church daycare centers, to help them stay open for first responders. So any of that type of income that's flowing in to help support the church, whether it's federal government, local government, would be recorded on table 3. Also, I touched on equitable compensation. That is recorded on table 3 as well. And again, nothing on table 3 is used in the calculation of your mission share. It's all about income. So resources, we have a page on our website that is dedicated to everything regarding the statistical reporting process. The link is there at the top of the page. If you don't want to scribble down quickly, the quick way to find it is to just go to our homepage, and you'll see our little search bar at the top, and you can just type in the word statistical. And I tried it a couple of times today. I think the second or third result on the page is the stats reporting page. So what you will find there is the walkthrough of the login instructions that Crystal demonstrated earlier. It has that temporary passcode and the username combination that Crystal touched on. It has all of that in the instructions, as well as the basics of the data entry. There is a very comprehensive line by line guide that has the instructions for the lines, and that is where we have highlighted the changes to the average weekly attendance, the online worship, the various areas where you will record your PPP funds. All of that is highlighted both on the cover page and then within the page as well, so that it pops out at you and helps you see that and record things properly. The Excel version of the expense calculators is there. There's also some PDF versions. This this presentation is also available in PDF form as well. So anything that you might need to download or print out is there on that page. Beyond that, as you get going on all of this, if you have questions along the way, we're definitely here to help you out. You met all of your district administrators earlier on in the presentation. They are definitely your first line to via email or telephone to get any questions or concerns answered. They would certainly appreciate it if you call them early, because we get a large volume of questions and emails at the last minute. And if you would like to have more personal and prompt response, please ask us questions in mid-January as opposed to a day or two before the deadline. We will help you out regardless, but you will definitely get a quicker response if you ask us earlier in the month. Myself and Kayla Spears, who works with me, we also are the backup for the district administrators when they are not able to help you, or you have some complex questions about some mission share calculation issues or other questions that they may not be able to help you with. We stand ready to help you out as well. So please make sure you look at that page before you get into the process. Oftentimes, most of the questions that come up early in the process can be addressed with some of those resources. So definitely take a few minutes and avail yourself of anything that you can see there online. And again, we're here to help you if you have any issues at all. So with that, I will thank you for the time that you've spent. We're going to probably break away from this. I'm sure Bill may have a few other questions.
Oh, we've got just a few, so get comfortable, Dave.
Kick back.
First of all, I want to thank Christine Taylor. You can't see her, but she's working behind the scenes with me answering questions. So thank you so much, Christine. Couple of questions to go through. Could you reiterate or restate what the mission, what are the mission shares based upon? So categories, but then in addition to that, which lines on the report? So some people want to know just the categories. Some people want to know which of the specific lines. So I'll ask both questions as one.
Okay. So as far as the lines are concerned, all of the lines are on table 2. They are all expense lines, and they run from line 53 through line 62. And the general categories of those expenses are anything to do with the compensation of the pastors and staff, as well as the program expenses and the operating expenses for the church. The calculation of that will definitely be shown to you again on the verification form. So when you see the data that you input turned into the mission share total calculation, you will see that calculation again written out for you longhand to show you how it is reached. So it's all expense related and it's all on table 2.
Okay, so let's go into some of those expenses. I know capital maintenance expenses are taken out of the calculation.
Correct. So
is there a number for that? You know, I've got questions. Some people are asking about if they had their parsonage renovated or they had to purchase streaming equipment because of the pandemic. So is there a dollar amount, or is it just, how do you calculate what is a capital expense and what isn't?
Okay. So the capital expense is on line 63. I'm sorry, is 64. 64, and on the resource that is the table instructions online, that line probably has the most explanation of any of the others. So the key is a non-routine expense. So a boiler going up, a roof repair, something that is outside of a routine expense for the church. We tend to, just as a rough guideline, we'll say an expenditure that's over $1,000. If you have a maintenance contract, that's something that's a monthly expense, that would be an operating expense and not a capital expense. These are generally big chunks of money that the church is putting out. It might not have to be a repair. It might just be an upkeep issue where every maybe 10 years, the church has to undergo a full repainting of the inside of the church or the outside of the church. Something that is not in the annual budget usually is a good rule of thumb. And because those areas are expensive, those are the areas that you should have your bookkeeper or whoever's keeping your books recording those separately from your operating expense so that they can be reported on 64.
Now, you used rock tickets as an example for as a pass-through. What if a church, and you may have said this, but answering questions, I may have missed the answer. If a church is providing the rock tickets for free for a participant from the church, how would they include that expense?
That would be then a program expense on line 61. That would not be in the, what I was referring to as an in and out calculation. If you were getting some or all of that cost reimbursed, that's when you're going to be paying attention to the net of those, the expense and the income. But if there's nothing that's being reimbursed, it's just a plain cost to the program line of your statistical reports.
Okay, now somebody else, very specific question. On table 2, question 60,
Wow.
Do I report health and pension?
Definitely do not. Oh, I'm sorry. 60, yes. If it is clergy, you do not record the benefits expenses, but on line 60, at all other church staff, that is the whole compensation package, which includes salary and benefits. And again, just make sure you're not recording the benefits for the clergy in that area.
Would
So,
that also include the church's portion of Social Security, taxes, and those sundry
correct.
governmental payments?
Anything that's associated with the compensation of their staff members.
Okay, let me, as you answer, I respond to our question askers. We've had a lot of questions about grants received, because I know Dr. Smothers in my office offered the technology grant. I know we had the small membership grant that for those who weren't paying pension and who didn't have to pay pension or medical. So where would you report? We'll do two parts to this question. First part is, where do you report grants? Where do you report grants you've received?
So the income side of it is going to be on table 3. It's line 69, depending on the type of grant, it's going to be 69A, B, or C. Equitable compensation grants are going to be 69A. Any type of federal, local grants from institutions, including the conference, would be 69C for things that are not associated with the compensation of a pastor. So that's where you would report the income from those grants.
And then, like with the technology grant, on a separate line item, separate table, you would report the expense, what you spent. If it was a technology grant, what you spent it on would then be in the expense side, correct?
The expense side, it's similar to the equitable compensation. The expense side of that does not have to be included if it's coming from the conference source, because the monies that we are using to give you those grants are raised with your mission share. So we don't want to hit you with mission share again on the outflow of it. So those can be backed out of your expenses.
So just so I heard you correctly, so our participants heard you correctly, the grants that people received from the conference, like the technology grant, the small membership church grant, the expense does not have to get reported, just that they received the grant.
That's correct.
Excellent. Let's see. Here's an interesting question that I've not encountered before. And if you don't know the answer, that's okay. Where would you put financial loss from abandoned work by a contractors and the money was given in advance?
I'd have to think on that one.
Okay, so to our anonymous attendee who asked that question, Dave will get, if we knew your name, Dave could get back to you, but you asked the question anonymously. So that is a new one.
I would say that if it's if the work took place, that would be, and it depends on what the work is for. If it's something where it's a capital expense, where it's a major repair, it might not matter a whole lot because it's not going to be part of the mission share. But if it's an operating expense, if you were paid your janitor to clean the church and they walked away with the money, I would say you do not have to report that expense because you actually didn't spend it on anything. It was just no different than theft or anything else. It's just money that left you. So
okay, so just
reported in that category of expense.
Just so we can, to help clarify, and the person, thank you, I'll just use her first name. Thank you, Sharon, for letting us know that you asked the question. If it was going to be a capital expense, you wouldn't report it because it was a capital expense. If somebody, I'm putting this in quotes, stole the money, meaning you paid them, but they didn't do the work, so the work was not done by that person, you're recommending not to count it as an expense either.
Correct.
Did I hear that correctly? Okay.
Correct. Yeah, it's not recorded anywhere. Along the same lines, if there is expenses that are, if you receive a loan for something, the actual, if say you get a $20,000 loan to offset ongoing expenses for the church, it's the repayment of the loan is the expense, not the actual receipt of the principal from the loan. Sometimes people will have a line of credit or something like that. It's the paying back of it that's actually recorded.
And with that, David, oh. Somebody else is suggesting you could also record if you can determine the percentage of work that was completed.
Oh, well, that's true. That's
We have some of the most helpful participants on Training Tuesday. They're just, oh man, now they're all coming in. So I think we need to go over again the PPP reporting, because as we did that pause, we've had 3 or 4 questions come in of how you include or where you include the PPP monies.
Okay, so I will read off of the resource that we have called the Statistical Reporting Table and Worksheet Instructions. The PPP funds are going to be recorded in two areas. Oh, Tanya, look at her. So table 2, right, oh, keep going. A little farther down, you'll see it in yellow. There you go. So table 2, if you have a PPP loan and that loan was not forgiven, that's going to be a debt to the church that should be reported in the debt area. The area that it is recorded is line 39. Again, that's only if the loan has not been forgiven, which is going to be a pretty rare case based on the guidelines the federal government is giving us. So if the loan is not forgiven, that's going to be where the debt gets recorded. And then regardless of whether it is forgiven or not, the actual income from that loan is recorded on table 3 down at the very bottom in the line 69 area. And that'll again be in yellow. So 69C, you'll see it there in yellow, instructs you to enter the amount received from the Paycheck Protection Program, whether or not it's been forgiven or not. So it's income to the church, and that's where you will record the income coming in. And I mentioned before, I'll mention it again, if there are other institutions, local governments that may also be offering the church grants, that would be recorded in the exact same place on that line 69C.
Thank you very much, David. You use the phrase, and I know what it means, but not everyone knows what it means. But you use the phrase operating expenses.
Mm-hmm.
Someone's wondering what's considered an operating expense. So could you give some examples of that for us, please?
So I will look at the GCFA guidance on again on the table instructions. They are including as examples office expenses, property maintenance, insurance, and utilities as operating expenses. Anything that is not related to program expenses. So if you have Sunday school books and materials, that's going to be a program expense. Keeping the physical plant of the church going, all of those expenses from maintenance contracts to utilities, anything related to that is going to be in line 62. That's generally going to be the bulk of your budget outside of salaries.
And I'm going to circle back around to the PPP again.
Mm-hmm.
So you're counting it coming in. Do you count it going out as a salary expense?
Yes. So the only thing that's backed out of the expenses, it would be a conference source of the income. So if it's equitable compensation that's being used to pay the salary of the pastor, that would not be reported. That would be backed out of the total salary package that you report on table 2. But other sources, yes, you would record it there.
And do the local churches have to account for the credit that was given for the pastor's pension and health insurance? That's the 3-month waiver.
Oh. I will have to send out some guidance about that.
So Helen, who asked the question, we're going to have to get you some guidance.
I will confer with my boss tomorrow.
Wonderful. Now, interesting question. If a church vehicle is used for missional purposes, is there a way not to have the costs for operating it count against the church's operating costs?
No, that is the costs associated with the church vehicle are generally going to be in program. However, if there are specific, if all of the church vehicle is used for missional expenses, or we're going to let you use your best judgment. If you have a trip that you're taking for missional related purposes, gas expenses, that type of thing, we just ask that you document it. But yes, that's an area where if it's a split use, if it's a mission trip for your youth, that would be part of your program expenses. So keep that in mind. There might be a differentiation there.
This look of confusion is not with your answer, it's with some of the questions coming in that
That's good.
I'm trying to figure out how to ask them. So there's further questions about capital improvements, particularly as it relates to equipment that had to be acquired for streaming purposes due to the pandemic. Now, under one instance, if I was just a church going out to buy them under normal circumstances, that would be an operating expense. But if I had no plan to purchase, but had to as a result of the pandemic, would that be a capital expense?
I think we'll send out guidance on that.
Okay.
We'll include that with the guidance about the credits, the COVID credits, because I think it's all in the same category. Those are good questions.
And I would remind people something you said earlier in the presentation. This is not a typical year. I don't know if there's going to be an asterisk next to everything this year, but this isn't a typical year, and so things will be adjusted. I'm not sure. Somebody asked, what if a church used the PPP loan and gave it to mission projects in the community?
That's fine. You would record that in your missional expenses. So that would not be included as your mission share calculation.
But am I also correct in understanding that if the PPP money wasn't used for salaries, it would then become a loan?
Well, that's true. From our standpoint, you could, if that's what you did with it, the federal government or your bank might have something else to say. Because yes, the intent of that money was for employment and keeping your staff employed. So keep that in mind when it most likely is going to convert that PPP loan or grant into a loan that you'll have to pay back.
Now, is there a line item if a church was reimbursed monies from an insurance company due to damages? Is there an income line for that, or how is that reported?
That should definitely be an income line. Off the top of my head, I'm just looking here. There is a kind of a catch-all line that's 68C, funds from other sources and projects. You could put it there. But because it is income, it definitely would not be included on your mission share calculation. So,
And I think that might be the confusion for some people. Mission shares are calculated on expenses, not
Correct.
on income.
Correct.
It's important to get the income calculations correct. I don't want to minimize that, but
Mhm.
but it doesn't affect your mission share amount.
That is correct.
It's 8:28. We've gotten through all the questions, Dave.
Wow.
If
That's
some of
impressive.
our other presenters have their videos turned off, you can turn them off and turn them on now so we can say good night to you. Hey, they're coming back. If you don't see your DA left, that they are participating. I can see them in the attendees. We moved some to keep the screen manageable. We moved some to participants, and they knew that they were going to be made participants, but they're still here. I can see them in the list. So I don't want anyone thinking that they didn't. So I'd like to thank everyone so much for coming tonight. I love the attendance we have on Training Tuesdays, and we try to hit everything from the creative to the practical. And this is one of the most practical Training Tuesdays we offer. And so I want to thank our presenters for taking the time to be with us to answer these important questions. For those who are watching tonight, thank you for participating and giving your time for this event this evening. And people are putting in the Q&A all the thank yous that you can imagine, because I know they can't clap, but they're thanking you. And for those who have wondered, yes, we are recording this. It will be available later this week on the conference website, along with the PowerPoint slides will be available. And you can go back through this or have other people from your church watch it with you. So before we close in prayer, I do want to highlight our next Training Tuesday is next Tuesday, December 15th. It is our last Training Tuesday of 2020, and we can hopefully say hello soon to 2021. It is going to be it's primarily designed for clergy and for staff parish or pastor parish relations committee members, and it's going to be dealing with clergy care and Sabbath. And that is an important topic all the time, but I think it's even more important during this season of COVID, because a number of our clergy colleagues are working so much harder than ever during this pandemic. And so we want to make sure we know how to care for them. And that information is also on the conference website for registering for that. And with that, I'm going to invite our district superintendent representative, Reverend John Wunderlich, to close us in prayer this evening.
Thank you, Bill. Let's pray together. Gracious God, thank you for all of the information shared, all of the insight and wisdom and direction and guidance. Thank you for all of the questions. Thank you for all of the people who logged in to participate tonight. Give them a restful night and another day to wake and serve you. We give you thanks and praise in the name of Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you all so very much for attending. Have a good night.
Good night, everyone.